Hello there, everybody. Welcome to my camper. This little guy, Sherpa, is a modified vintage Casita. It sits up on a jacked up frame, and we've taken it around and camped in it for years. But the climate control has always been a little bit weak. We had a radiant heater running on propane that we never used. It never really felt that safe. And it has no AC. So what we're about to do is outfit it with an OutEquip heat pump unit, and it's going to install right there in that existing skylight, 14 by 14 vent skylight. So this here is the OutEquipPro roof mount heat pump unit that we're going to install in Sherpa, our little trailer. And we're just going to get into it and see what comes in the box, see how well it's packaged, and go from there. All right. Looks like we have some gasketing seal material at the top of the unit. Some cabling. Set that over there for now. Not a big fan of styrofoam, but it's unavoidable at this point. I'd love to see him use something like a form of cardboard, but whatever gets the package there soundly, and I do have the ability to recycle that stuff. So, all right, looks like we got a little bit of a heavy lift here. More gasket material. I'm going to get hands-free, and we'll go from there. Nice heavy-duty cabling. We'll set that out of the way. The rooftop unit. It's not light, but it's manageable. Hopefully you can see it there. The cabling's attached. And then down here at the bottom, we've got the interior vents. More gasketing and sealing material. Looks like an interior bezel. Little bit of damage on the corner of the box where you'd expect it, but I don't see anything that's transferred through to the products. Attachment rails. Gasket material. Some hardware. And just what I need. Installation guide. So, today's Sunday. I'm going to spend this week making sure that I've got my head completely wrapped around this and I've got any extra equipment that I need. I'm going to be doing this as a non-standard install. My current bank of 3 lead acid batteries isn't going to work for very long powering this thing. I do intend to upgrade to lithiums, but I do have an 80 amp power supply that should be capable of powering this thing. And so my plan right now is to set it up to where shore power is going to feed this power supply, provide the 12 volt. I will eventually get an interlock solenoid and bigger batteries and have the ability to run this when we're off grid. But for the most part, the goal right now is to get comfort on both ends of the camping spectrum, hot and cool, and be able to make my wife happy, because that's how my life is going to be happy. Well, can't help a little bit of a process shot. It's dirty up here, but I got the frame removed mostly. I got to clean up a lot more. All right, not quite perfect, but all the sealant's off and we've got a flat surface. I could go here. I'm going to take a little time to degrease and clean up the old gel coat. I am going to repaint it later on this season, or before this camping season. But, you know, I want it cleaner, and who knows, maybe something happens, I don't get to it, and I want to take it out camping and not look like mildew central. Okay, I think I'm done cleaning up the top and about ready to go up with this and start putting it in place. But before we do that, this unit has a pretty heavy duty cable, and there's 3 ways that you can route it. Apparently through a gland with a hole in the roof. I like to avoid doing that, considering with a 14 by 14 hole, there's already enough space to bring the cable in that way. You can Okay, it's worth noting that those 3 screws in the front that don't appear to hold it on actually do. They're holding in little retaining tabs that are connected to the plastic. The fusible link isn't going to fit through that hole, and probably not through any other holes we need to route it through. So I've got, let's see, looks like an 8mm socket. We're going to bust that off and route it through, and then look at rerouting it down through the inside. This unit has the heater unit, therefore it's a little different than the drawing. So what I'm going to do is, on the drawing in the manual, or the rendering in the manual, the cable comes off the back of the compressor. On this unit, because there's a heater, it appears that the cable makes a trip past the heater and then leaves there before it enters. In that document, it shows that you can bring it in through the air intake. I'm going to do that, but instead of coming in this side where there's a shorter run, I'm going to come in this side where there's a shorter run. And this cover was initially hard to remove, but that's because there's some butyl holding it down and sealing this hole. I'm going to go ahead and find a hole saw the same size as the penetration that came through the case that I backed the cable out of. I'm going to put a hole in the side of the styrofoam insulating hood here, and I'm going to go through that, and then if necessary I'll seal that with some butyl that I have, or some butyl tape similar to this other side. Got a bigger drill. There's a rib back in behind here. I'm just feeling to see where that is. Feels like it lines up a little bit past the screw. So I'm going to go in right in this corner. And because there's a fair amount of plumbing and wiring, I'm going to kind of go high so that I'm bypassing it. Easy peasy. Styrofoam's not exactly hard to drill. Sorry about that. Okay, they've got the zip tied in here pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and back it up with a zip tie right here on the cable, so the new position. It'll act as a strain relief for where the cable's coming out of the heater. We don't want to introduce any stress. And so we're going to lock that in right there. And then I'm going to come with a little patch of butyl tape. So that's how it turned out. We've got it zip tied in place. It's out of the way of the case, I believe. We're in there, and then we're down through the duct, but not the actually air return portion of the duct. It's the control side of the duct. I've got to figure out how I'm going to route it on the inside, but I figure I'm going to just tuck out around the bezel, and then I have a little sneaky spot where I should be able to run this. Since it's already in a nice loom, I'll just treat that as conduit. And bracket it up super clean, and hopefully it doesn't detract anything from the interior. I don't think it will. It's a short run from this bezel to a little mini wall that I have there. Of course, I got to get it back together first. Might as well show that part too, eh? All right, that's the internals back together. Here comes the outer shell. Little stainless steel screws, machine screws, have plastic washers. Some of them stay with the fastener, some of them stay with the body. I'm going to try and pay extra careful attention to make sure I get them in the right place. Don't forget to reinstall this. If you install this without the fuse, you are in dangerous territory, but I'm going to leave it off for now because I may have to route this through another hole in the trailer. All right, let's get it up. All right, this is pretty nice. What I found is that these corners, if you start at the corner, peel just a little bit and position it. So I started pulling the tape to the corner, and now what I'm gonna do is go poke my head up inside so that I can make sure that I'm getting this around. I've also got to get the wire back out of the way, right? But I'm gonna get this gasket in place, the 2 foam support strips in the back in place, to help hold the unit up, and then we should be to a point where we can check the fitment of the bezel on the interior, and what I might have to do for custom filler or spacer. I've already done the one side. I just basically have placed these back foam supports and marked them lightly with pencil, but I'm actually kind of installing it underneath. What I can do is I can pull this out for a second, start the paper off of the adhesive, and then slowly pull it off. So I'm going to do that off camera. It's really hard to film and do these things at the same time, but that's right about 2.5 inches. When I pull those braces up in tight, everything should seal. I've got the power coming through the cable bay. I should be able to come in behind that bracket and get that attached. And then this will tuck back in behind the wood there. Hopefully you can see that, and route down the backside there to where it can access the electrical. My shore power box and all the power, both AC and DC for the unit, is directly under this seat cushion right here. The unit is sitting on a Casita roof, which is lightweight and flexible. And part of the reason I wanted to do this before I paint is I may decide that it needs support. Many Casitas with a full-size AC unit have a support structure for it, but this thing's considerably smaller and lighter than that, and I may be able to get away with just having a good bracket, good brace. We'll see. So this is all trial and error for this Casita build. Okay. I'm going to go up with the threaded rods that they give and install those, and start to secure this unit down so that it stays in place. And then I'm going to figure out where I'm at on spacing. I may have to cut these bolts too, just so you know. It does mention that that's a likely scenario, but it sure looks like by the time I get that bezel on, this whole thing is going to have at least 1 inch of extra bolt. What I found on the gasket, I did end up pulling the gasket and putting it right up to the edge of the 14x14 hole. That is the only way that this works. So having it spaced out extra wide, not so good. Okay, I'm back with the bezel. Here's that. What I want to see, get this through here. What I want to see is what this looks like as far as what it's going to cover. And you know, right now I've got about 1 inch too much in the way of bolt sticking down, and that's only going to get worse when this comes tight, because I'm going to get a little bit more from crushing that gasket down. So I think what I've got to do is install these so I know exactly where they need to be, mark the length of the bolt, and cut them. That way that bezel is going to sit up flush when everything's all installed, and I definitely want this to look clean. So I'm going to get after that. And we'll catch you when these things are shortened. What's happening is, can you see this bow here? So fiberglass doesn't want to be point loaded. I'm going to have to build a frame for this. I can probably bust that out pretty quickly. I'm going to need to use some pretty strong wood, and I need something that's going to have some rigidity. Perhaps I want to leave the bolts and use that thickness to create a thicker bezel and some nice trim wood. I've got teak throughout, so if I made a piece that was slightly larger than this in teak, say right around 3/4 of an inch, I'm gonna have no problem finishing it out with this bezel. The only problem is I can already not really stand in our Casita. But you know what? In a lot of ways, this trailer isn't for me. It's for my lovely wife, and she can. Think about this. We did have a bezel there before. It doesn't really become a problem for cooking. I'm gonna have to solve this problem. And you might get to see the results later. But I'm gonna need something, because even if I chop those bolts a little bit, I don't have the rigidity I need in this roof. But coming underneath and pulling up a solid wood frame, that's gonna add a heck of a lot of rigidity. And that might just be exactly what I need to do. And if I put wherever those joints are, some really strong little brackets, I could use sprocket screws, something that takes a lot of force. I think that's going to add a fair amount of push right here, and that's going to make the whole unit sit a lot better. So like I said, stay tuned, we'll figure it out. All right, back out of the shop next day. Found some teak. Cutting board tabletop available at local big box home improvement retailer. Got 2 of them just in case I need. Plus I thought maybe make a nice cutting board. It's 1 inch thick. It's going to probably get me all the spacing I need, and I should be able to sneak a little relief in it to sneak out that cable. I'm going to do some woodworking. I'm going to cut part of this down into some strips. I'm going to make a little box frame. I'm going to reinforce it. Little aluminum right where I'm going to sneak out the cable so that I don't compromise the strength there. I'm going to do all that off camera because it's kind of not related to the install, and I'll show you the after effects. Wish me luck. So I glued and screwed together a bezel of teak wood, made sure it was just a little bit bigger than the existing plastic frame, cut a relief for the power cord, and added a little support for that weak spot in the wood. I also prepped the power supply unit for installation. That was a little bit longer of a project than I expected, but the woodworking that I did looks good. Found that piece of teak, got it formed up. It is making a very solid case for supporting the unit up there. I was able to get the brackets in place. I'm going to get the bezel now and just see how everything kind of like fits up there, and we'll see how it goes. I had to trim even more material off of this back flange, leaving enough for this to hold. And I had to trim a little bit on this. These corners interface with this bar. There's a wire. I'll pull this down. And I hope you can see that. That is much, much closer. Instead of 1 inch hanging down, it's probably under 3/4 of an inch, 5/8. There's a cable that comes out of the back of the air duct. I notched this, and I'm going to radius that a little more smoothly, but it just allows enough clearance. And there's some structural ribs in the plastic underneath there that interfere with this actually sliding all the way on. So I notched those a little bit to get just a little bit more clearance, and I think it all fits. We'll go ahead and do this in a single take, and I may or may not be embarrassed, but let's just see how this goes. I can always edit, but first, I gotta make sure that this sits in like so. And there we go, more or less. Okay, so I can accept that, and here's why. First of all, screws are gonna pull that up tighter. I can always put some screws in the trim bezel. I'm gonna definitely use some finish
caps if I do that. But you can see that's all sitting much, much closer. And I put some expanding foam. It's this kind of stuff. And it hasn't expanded yet, but it'll help fill in that bezel. And I think when that is all snugged up nice and tight, the air will be filled in. That'll have a little bit of a soft finish. Bump your head, it won't be a big deal. These screws will go in a little tighter. And I can accept that little gap with a foam fill. You know, in all fairness, what we're doing is modifying this a little bit to be used in a way it wasn't completely intended. And possibly this can give some feedback to the manufacturer about how to slightly modify the design next run to be a little bit more friendly to these single walls. These trailers are really great. They're rot proof. They hold up really well, and that's why my vintage 86 Casita is going strong. But yeah, it could use a little help on the HVAC department, and I think this is going to take care of it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's the next day. It's Monday after work. I'm happy to say I think this is going to work out pretty well. Couple things. In a previous shot, you'll have seen that I had this bracket in the front here. There's actually two spots to mount that front bracket. There's one across the front and one across the back. Had I mounted it across the back, it would have been less of an issue to get all this to fit in here, but I would have had to cut away a different spot. And I like having the support on the unit all the way forward and all the way back, because the fiberglass is so flexible. It pinches it tighter up against the wood. I did notice later in the drawings on the instructions that the bracket was in the back, and it probably would have made things fit a little bit better on some of your applications. But on mine, the real issue is that the thing is so thin, this roof is so thin that I need to be thicker in order to have it really fit with all of the functions. So now listen, this is really close. I like it because it's actually got a gasket filled in all the way, and it creates a little bit of a small soft landing spot if I bump my head on it, because I barely fit in here. This is airtight, it's sealed, it's clean. I showed you the modifications I had to do, but here's the moment of truth. I've got the power supply unit, the 110 volt to 12 volt, rated for 1,000 watts. It's a unit that I know that has popped up on their documentation as being enough. I've got in on a breaker, so I'm going to flip on that breaker. And the unit is now powered. I'm going to hit the power, and I'm seeing a temperature displayed on the screen. It says 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the setting. I don't really know how to work things here very well, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it up. And I've got airflow. Got the remote, light, pretty dark in here, and that's pretty useful. I can turn the LED off, which is going to be nice when you're sleeping. It is putting out warm air. You're not going to, thaw out dinner with this. But in this little thing, that's going to make a big, big difference. I'm going to let it run for a little bit, close the door up. The heat should probably tax this thing as much as anything. I still need to pull the cable in with a bracket, but I may wait to do that. It's actually pretty well secured back in behind here, behind a shelf. I ran down behind the back side of this little mini wall. Those of you that are Casita owners, I'm not going to get into the minutia of where I placed everything, because this is a total custom build out. This thing is 86. It is not like any other out there. This is a custom unit, custom cabinetry. It was a lot, but that's because this Casita's got single wall, much thinner, takes a lot more work. I had an existing vent that required a lot of cleanup. I had to make this custom bezel, which I think looks really clean with the teak. Ties in with the rest of the teak. And sometimes doing a good job takes time. I will say this. I don't know that this is a DIY build for everybody. I teach shop, manufacturing, welding, woodworking. I'm pretty good with tools. You might be too. This might be a job for you. This might be something some of you want to hire out. But I'm hoping that maybe by seeing this, the company will understand some of the requirements of single wall and maybe come up with a kit or an add-on that makes it work a little bit easier for the next one of you that want to try it. It's right around 50 degrees right now. So what I'm going to do is set this guy up here. Maybe like that so it doesn't roll away. I don't know. Yeah, like that. And I'm going to go ahead and run this in heater mode, close it up, and go inside, eat my dinner, come back out and see what the temperature's done with it running in heater mode on Eco. I think that's a thing. Let's see. We're going to go on, Eco, heat. I'm going to set the temp. It's about, 30 minutes later. It's now 58, almost 59 degrees. I can hear the power supply unit cycling on and off as the heater draws more and more power. It's on eco mode. It's definitely putting out heat. So cables are slightly warm to the touch, not anything concerning. They do radiate some heat when they're drawing current. And I would assume that with an ambient temperature in the 40s, cranking out warm air, it's going to draw a fair amount of power in the heat mode. So we're going to switch modes now. We'll see about bringing the temperature back down. Now, I don't expect this is going to be much of a challenge because it's cold outside. I just heard the compressor kick on. It's pretty quiet, but there's a little bit of a rattle noise when the compressor kicks on. But we've got cold air coming in. I can feel the cold air. I don't think I'm going to wait for it to do a test. Why? It's 46 outside. Bringing this temperature down inside below 62, it could just be the fan mode. I'm pretty impressed. It's quiet. The install is a little tricky, but that's more due to the situation. Pretty happy with it. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good night.